So, my book club guest today is author Leanne Child, whose gripping new novel, The Trad Wife Secret, delves into the glossy, curated world of the so-called trad wife lifestyle and the dark secrets that can lurk beneath the surface. Leanne unpacks themes of identity and control and the pressures of perfection in the age of social media. So, I'm thrilled to welcome her to Brooklands Radio to talk about her writing, the trad wife trend, and what inspired her to explore it through fiction. Liane, welcome. Thank you for joining me on my book club today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
It's great to meet you. So, what inspired you to write The Trad Wife's Secret?
Well, I think I've become a bit fascinated with the whole trad wife phenomenon. So I'm a wife and I'm a mother, but I'm like, that's about as far as I get in the whole trad wife world. But I started getting their kind of reels on Instagram, and a few particularly they're so good, they're so engaging, and I'd find myself like watching them making sourdough bread, or I mean basically anything, like going to church. I'm watching this and I can get really drawn in, and I was just thinking, like, if I can get drawn into this, there were two elements to it. One, if I can get drawn into this, then kind of anyone can. But also, I've really had to check myself because I believed it. I looked at these women who had maybe 8 kids and they live in the middle of nowhere, but they are presenting it as an idyllic life. And I'm believing it's an idyllic life. And then I have to think, hang on a minute, I've got 2 kids and it can be chaos. So how can 8 kids be easy and simple and peaceful like you're presenting it? And that's where I thought, this isn't actually true. And that kind of link between, we watch fiction on TV or whatever in films, and we know it's fiction. But social media, we think of as, because I guess where it first started, it was real. It was people, sort of journaling their life online. But it's now got, with the help of technology and just people being more savvy, it's become much more fictional. And yet we still have this kind of assumption that it's real. And that's when it can become quite dangerous. So I had the idea to write a fictional book that was the idea that the sort of, it's all a lie, really. So what sits behind the filter is very different to what you see on
It's a good way of putting it, what sits behind the filter. Can I then just get back to basics? Could you explain exactly what the trad wife phenomenon is?
Yes, that would probably help, wouldn't it? So the trad wife essentially is a wife and generally a mother who has decided to live her life by sort of traditional conservative values. So she'll be a stay-at-home mum, she'll cook food from scratch, she might grow her own vegetables, make her own clothes, maybe she'll homeschool her children. And also within the family, there's quite a patriarchal kind of setup. So the husband, father is sort of the boss of the family, and everyone kind of accepts that. So, but that's kind of the idea behind a traditional wife. Then the kind of trad wife movement is actually being played out on social media. So that's when you bring in the aesthetic element to it. So they generally have beautiful kitchens. They might be in some beautiful Montana homestead, like Madison is in The Trad Wife Secret, but the setup is very beautiful and lovely, and they tend to make a real effort with their appearance. They'll be fully made up making their sourdough bread, and it's quite a feminine kind of dresses kind of look. And so that's kind of like an extra element to. So it's not just about being a traditional wife; it's about being a traditional wife.
It's the idea of
showing
doing it
perfect.
perfectly. It's like a traditional wife on steroids. It's like a wife who basically looks beautiful all the time, gets up early before her husband does, just so she can maybe put on her makeup and have her hair just right, and kowtow in many ways, do everything her husband wants. Will make a separate meal for him because he won't want children's food, or, as you said, do everything from scratch and make it look unrealistically easy, like everybody could do this.
Yes.
So,
yeah, exactly.
And social influencers are obviously, they have such a lot of followers. Some of these trad wives have got millions of followers, haven't they?
Yeah, they have. And I think that's where the sort of potential danger lies, is because some people can just, like it as a bit of escapism and, not really think too much more about it. But for some women who are maybe in a bit more vulnerable position, for different reasons, they might think, that's what I want. I want to be able to live that kind of life, and maybe not see the sort of the dangerous, the kind of, they see it as like an empowering thing, because I can give up work and I can just be in control of my own destiny and my children and my life and what I eat, what I grow. But actually they're giving away an awful lot of their power, really. And the sort of kind of anti-feminism of it is kind of an interesting element as well, I think. And
It is,
so I
because
try
what
to
they
explore
think
that in the book
they
as well.
because what they think they're getting in freedom, you're actually going back to sort of pre-women's movement, when you didn't have sort of rights for abortion or divorce, or marital rape wasn't a thing, and you couldn't sign a lease for a house by yourself. So it's very much the frothy stuff on top. They want to get back into the good stuff, but not give up the freedoms and independence, really, that women have fought for many, many years. Why do you think it is becoming so popular at the moment?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think it's a coincidence that it's happening. So I would actually just take a moment to say my research has mainly done it in the States rather than in the UK. The trad wife phenomenon is in the UK, but it's, I think, stronger over there, more
Is
extreme.
it? I didn't even realize it was in the UK, to be honest. I thought it was very much, as you said, like the Montana, the sort of the Midwest states and things. I didn't realize it was getting a hold in the UK as well.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's a bit up for debate, because some like influencers, some British influencers will say that they're not a trad wife, that they, they're just a stay-at-home mum who wants to kind of cook her nice food and, organic food and all that, So yeah, what makes a trad wife is hard to completely just to sort of button down, I think. But there is definitely women in the UK who are putting that kind of content online. Just the idea that the whole rise of the trad wife in the States is dovetailing with other issues that are happening over there, which you mentioned, and this kind of like moving into kind of both extremes of the sort of left and right, and the sort of culture wars that are kind of developing still in the States. And so there's that sense of finding their tribe, and this is my tribe, within this kind of more right-wing, conservative, maybe rural areas and states in America.
Sort of like the pioneer woman and some of those things. I mean, there's a lot of material out there to watch that is sort of along those lines. Like The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives is spectacularly popular at the moment, isn't it? And things like The Pioneer Woman, where, she's at home rocking up this feast every day while her husband is out, being a cowboy, basically. The gender roles are just so clearly defined, the pink and blue jobs. And it's very odd, isn't it, really, as independent, free-thinking women, to believe that women will happily take orders from their husband as to, what to cook, when to cook, how to look, when to get your hair cut, all of those things. It is surprising. But let's get back into your protagonist, who, I think, so here's the book, The Trad Wife's Secret. And as you can see, well, if you're looking on YouTube, you can see she's basically holding a cherry pie, I think it is, or some kind of berry pie, in a white dress. I mean, who does that, for a start? But so the protagonist is leading a very curated, picture-perfect life. But it's not all as it seems, is it? So tell us a bit more about setting that whole character up.
Okay, so Madison March is like the queen of the trad wives in the US. She's got 10 million followers. She's got a gorgeous sort of hot rancher husband who runs one of the biggest ranches in Montana. She's got 4 children, all sort of cute as pie, and she puts out a lot of content. But she's having to strike a really sort of fragile balance, because on one hand, she feels that her content is becoming less relevant, that there's a new generation of trad wives coming through that are kind of more savvy, more edgy, a bit more controversial in the sort of content they put out there, which then the algorithms pick up. And so she feels a little bit vulnerable in that sense. But also, she has to position her kind of like massive media empire and all her brand deals as kind of a hobby to her husband, Michael, because he's the big masculine rancher and he needs to be the one in control. So she's sort of this balancing act going on. But she's also got a huge secret that she's keeping as well, which, she has been keeping quite well, but things are happening outside of her control that are kind of bringing that secret further to the surface. So that's Madison and her family. And then you've got Callie, who is the new tutor who arrives, and she's from Boston, and she's like your typical Gen Z progressive sort of young person. And she thinks, she's savvy enough to know what kind of happens and it's not all as real as it looks, but she has no idea quite how much of a lie the sort of setup is in Montana. But there's things that have happened in her life as well that she's kind of stuck there for a year. So she has to sort of make do with this crazy life that she's kind of come into. So she's kind of finding her way at the same time as Madison's dealing with all her sort of issues. But there's another character called Brianna who actually lives in Wyoming, and she is just starting out on the tradwife journey with her sort of childhood sweetheart, Jonah. And they're very much in love, and they've got all these kind of very optimistic hopes for this kind of homesteading life they're setting up, but they are totally unprepared for the amount of hard work that's involved in it, largely because she's looking online and seeing, being inspired by other women who seem to be doing it so effortlessly. So there's her journey as well, and how that kind of falls apart really over
And
time.
of course,
Without giving
Madison's
any spoilers.
best. No, exactly. But you weave in a number of different tales into the whole plot, which I think is done in a really beautiful, very clever way. And of course, then you've also got Madison's sidekick, her best friend, her confidant, who was with her for the ride. And we know that they're running from something, but we have no idea. There's obviously some deep and dark secret that they share that they just can't tell anybody, and it bonds them very, very closely. And all, more of that obviously emerges as the book goes on. When you did your research, and you don't have to answer this exactly, but were there any particular influences out there that you based some of these characters on, or was it sort of an amalgamation of a number of them?
One.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm not, I think anyone who reads it will see the sort of ballerina farm element of it, but I was really careful not to just recreate a ballerina farm. There is some elements that are similar, but there's a lot that isn't. So, she is, quite a leading character within that world, even though she would describe herself as not being a tradwife, which I should say. But I think she does inspire women within that kind of movement. And so, it's an amalgamation.
What has the feedback been from people who have read your book? What are people saying about it?
So, initially it's a thriller. Fundamentally, it's a thriller. And so I'm looking for, lots of my feedback. It's basically really, really positive, which is amazing. But a lot of it, is obviously from people who read thrillers, and they're looking at it from the thriller aspect. There are some, my early reviews, I got one from a tradwife, a self-proclaimed tradwife. And I kind of held my breath when I read it, because I was thinking, but it was such an amazing review, and it kind of said how I absolutely reflected the lifestyle. And, it was a real moment of relief, really, because I tried really hard to try not to be too judgmental. I know, I have my opinions on it, but I didn't want to, my opinions aren't necessarily correct. I have to kind of look at the wider kind of views on it and try and kind of show that there is some good elements to it too. Just, kind of, it's hard to explain exactly. But, I wanted to sort of, because I'm not saying women are stupid by going into this lifestyle. So there are definitely, draws to it, attractions to it. So I wanted to kind of make that clear. And I think getting good feedback from people who live that life was nice to get.
What do you think that did compel you about the lifestyle? Was there anything that you thought, actually, that would be really nice to live in that way sometimes? We all live such busy, multitasking lives, don't we? Were you drawn to it in some way?
I think that, women have kind of fought hard to be able to work and have really, big careers, but we haven't been so successful at relinquishing the chores at home in general. So women have got to a point where they're working really hard, but they're also doing most of the housecare and most of the childcare. And there is an element that women are tired and also feel it's not fair. That the sort of perhaps fairer, better way to deal with it is to do less chores at home, but perhaps the easier way is to not work. And so I think that is a draw. And I think there's also guilt as a mother. You always have this element of guilt. You're not doing enough for your children. So the idea that you can be there for your children and be the best mother you can possibly be. Now, I say this as a working mum. I've always worked, and I don't. So, I'm not judging. I can, possibly not judge other women for working, but I do understand that element of feeling like that's your role to be there for your children, because that's, everybody wants the best for their kids.
Totally. I mean, it's very difficult to find that balance, isn't it? Because as you said, sometimes, those jobs are not shared equally at home. So women do end up taking a lot more of the burden and getting, great jobs done and bringing up children and running a house. So in some ways, I can see the attraction of an element of trad wife, maybe on Saturdays and Sundays. That would be really nice, wouldn't it? Just to get the balance right instead of catch up. If you think Madison could give a piece of advice to women feeling torn between like modern independence and traditional roles, what do you think Madison might say to women? The fictional character of Madison. Would she give a piece of advice?
Madison wants an easy life. I know that sounds ridiculous, but she is ultimately quite lazy, and she will do anything really to sort of give herself a really lovely life. She married Michael. She loves his wealth, even before she had wealth. She likes the nice things in life, and she wants to, and she's an actress really. So gosh, her advice would be smile through everything.
That's a good one. That's a good one. And ironically, as you just mentioned, she doesn't actually have the money, because by following a trad wife example, all the money that she has earned, the millions that she's earned as an influencer, has gone into her husband's account, and she has no control over it, does she?
Yeah, that was quite important for me to sort of explore that area where she lives this very luxury life. They live in a beautiful homestead and she has lots of lovely clothes, but she has no control over her money. So even though she has these lovely things, she has them because Michael has agreed to her having them. So really, how lovely are they when they haven't been, you can't just go and buy something with your own money. You have to always have your husband's kind of agreement to do that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that was, something I think.
So really, all this is for her in many ways is an ego trip. It's a popularity contest. How pretty am I? How many people will listen to what I say and wear the clothes that I wear and cook the sourdough that I cook? So in a way, it's a bit of an ego trip all the way through, because she can't achieve much more than that.
Yeah, I think she's quite an insecure person, and she needs constant sort of affirmation of how beautiful she is and how sort of successful she is at the things that she does. And Laurie, who is her sort of sidekick, is that person who constantly gives it to her, and that's why Laurie is so important to her. But that is also what's feeding this need for millions of followers. But there is also that sense they never quite give her enough, so she always needs a few more and a few more. And then the sort of negative comments or losing followers has a really big effect on her.
Exactly. And I think that really does reflect the influencer world, where it can be very devastating to lose some followers or to have a story hit that changes people's perception of you. It's a very delicate balance that influencers are treading, isn't it? And I think you show that very well, that it is really hard to walk the tightrope, keep the followers, keep the momentum, stay popular, and then it could all come crashing down like a house of cards.
Yeah, or absolutely, the algorithms are completely in control. So if the algorithms decide that your content's not right, then that's, however hard you work, you're not really going to get the kind of traction that you're hoping for. So this whole sense of being empowered in this, world that you've created, actually, that's a little bit of a lie anyway, as in the sort of big corporate algorithms are the ones that are controlling you anyway.
So true. It's all incredibly fragile. Do you think there'll be a sequel?
We're in discussions. There's so much content in cultural wars in the States at the moment. There's just so much different things to talk about that it's actually quite hard to kind of, I am working on researching the next book, but we haven't quite buttoned down exactly what it's going to be yet, but maybe a sequel.
So
I do love
put
Madison.
you on the spot, didn't I? Totally put you on the spot. But I mean, I'd like to see what Madison March does, what she does at the end of the book, how she continues, because I think she's the kind of woman that would rise again. She'd find a way. Wonderful to talk to you. So The Trad Wife's Secret is now out. It's a really good twisty-turny psych thriller. I'd say it's a good old beach read. I know when I like a book, I read them basically in a day. And I read this one in one day on one flight. So because I couldn't put it down, I had to continue and find out what was going to happen. So well done, Leanne. Great debut novel for this book. And I'm hoping that we see more tradwife secrets or more secret lives exposed, because this was really enjoyable. So thank you so much for being on Book Club today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you.